objectives and policies related to open space, sport and recreation. It's also a strategy that is up to date and reflects our new strategic and organizational direction. It responds to current challenges and opportunities for growing and changing Tamaki Makaurau. We've also had the opportunity to integrate a Te Ao Maori worldview in the strategy, and so the strategy takes an ecosystem approach, and we think that's really a positive change from previous policies and plans. Enables us to focus our intervention to deliver multiple benefits and contribute to multi-dimensions of oranga or well-being. So the single, having a regional policy sets a common roadmap for the Auckland Council group to deliver on and other partners, stakeholders and community groups to contribute to. It also supports the governing body in its responsibility for the funding and allocation of resources, including making decisions on the long-term plan, annual budgets, work program, setting and gathering development contributions. The strategy has a level of directiveness, but also enables local boards to provide guidance to local boards for best practice to support implementation. So just speaking about how we've developed the strategy very briefly, we have had the guidance of an advisory structure, as you can see on the screen. And to give you a little bit of an idea of the scale of input that we have received, we've had 10 meetings with the Joint Political Working Group. We've had 6 meetings with the Maori Ropu, 7 meetings of the Joint Advisory and Maori Ropu, and over 60 interactions with local boards. So we've had a lot of guidance throughout the development of the strategy. I know that will be of interest. The Maori Ropu was formed. We've invited Manawhenua and Matawaka groups to join, and so that was a self-selection process, and we've had really superb guidance from the Maori Ropu. And I would like to meet here Paulette Reedy from, sorry, I just need to read that. Te Pakuri Kiri. Paulette has been instrumental in adopting a Te Ao Maori worldview and a framework into our strategy. Also, a big thank you to Active, and Debbie is going to say a few words in a minute. So what is it we're proposing? What is it you have in front of you? That's our strategy on the page. As you can see, the purpose of the strategy is to deliver open space, sport and recreation opportunities to benefit all Aucklanders equitably, now and for future generations. So that's the overall aim of the strategy. To do so, we have a single value, Manakitanga, which is showing respect, generosity and care for each other and our shared resources. And that value was selected by our Maori Ropu. We set 5 strategic directions, which will be on the left-hand side of your screen, where we are heading, which is quite holistic again, looking at recreational opportunities, but also climate, environmental benefits, and obviously physical activities. On the right-hand side, we also have 4 investment principles that were taken from thriving communities. And at the bottom of high interest to you, I'm sure, 3 policies which sets Auckland Council expectation for delivery. So how we make the most of our open spaces, how we acquire, we provide and acquire new open spaces, and how we invest in sports and recreation and play. So I'm sure you'll have questions on that. Just very quickly, the feedback that we have received. So we undertook consultation as well as a survey. Overall, there's very strong support, and you've got more detail in your report. We also engaged with local boards in April. There's general support for the strategy, but as you have heard from the Albert Eden local board, there's mixed views on policy 2, where some local boards felt that we were not providing enough open space through the policy, noting that 11 local boards supported our capacity approach. Those sentiments were echoed by the Joint Political Working Group. There's general support, apart from member Connie, who just do not support policies. She wants guidelines only. And some members expressed concern about policy 2, and again, members from the local boards side of the governance. So we made some changes based on the feedback that we have received, and the strategy is in attachment B with track changes showing what we've actually updated. And I'm happy to answer any questions, and if there's a need, we've got a more detailed presentation on policy 2, if that's helpful later on for the debate. But Debbie, who is a general manager for investment program and services at Active, would like to say a few words, if that's okay with you, Mr. Chair.
Good, and welcome, Debbie. Thanks so much to you and the team for being here. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you. Morena. Active has been involved in the development of the Manaaki Tamaki Makaurau Auckland Open Space Sport and Recreation Strategy. Both myself and Manu Pihama, our Māori partnerships manager, have been involved in the different ropu. We believe the strategy provides a clear pathway to navigate the complexities challenging Tamaki Makaurau in relation to sport, open space and recreation. There is a strong alignment with Active strategy, with our vision for Tamaki Makaurau to become the world's most active city by 2040, ensuring equitable opportunities for all whānau, tamariki and rangatahi. While participation rates have bounced back to pre-COVID levels for adults and tamariki, we see rangatahi participation has not recovered and continues to decline. The 4 investment principles, ensuring that investment decisions are evidence-based and targeted towards communities of the highest need, will have a positive impact for those considered to be missing out. We know that access to and provision of quality open space, sport and recreation facilities are fundamental to the well-being of Aucklanders. Being physically active has a positive effect on society, improving the well-being of people and communities and contributing to the Harora health and well-being of our tamariki and rangatahi. Research demonstrates the benefits of being physically active include a positive link to improved educational outcomes, which leads to an increase of 8.6 million of GDP growth annually for Makaurau. 372 million of healthcare savings, leading to 279 fewer deaths annually in Tamaki Makaurau. Participation provides currently 74.3 million hours of meaningful, positive social interaction annually. And finally, sport and recreation operating spend has a direct and significant correlation to participation levels for all. Active is committed to working with and supporting Auckland Council in the implementation of the strategy. We are dedicated to developing and sharing insights and understanding of future needs of Tamaki Makaurau. Ka pai.
Thank you. I'll go to questions and then there may be more discussion on the policy too, but I guess my main question, just because it may get brought up on the presentation from Albert Eden, our target we're looking for is between 10 and 20, not 20, and the reason would be, could you maybe give an example of what that might mean? And specifically, I think you've sent me an example of Wesley. What would be the required funding to get to, I mean, that's a great aspiration, but I think, could you be give us the details of what that would be?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So just maybe going back one step, when we looked at the 2016 policy and we assessed where it was working, we concluded that the policy was not working well in high-density area, nor was it working well in greenfield areas where you start from a next to inexistent network. So that's the things we wanted to fix in the refresh of the policy. So we have looked at a lot of different options as to how we can best address these problems. And we have done a lot of case studies in greenfield areas, medium density areas, high density areas across the city. It's also worth noting that there are no international standards when it comes to open space capacity. And that, in fact, capacity is important, but so is quality of open space and where the parks are located. So accessibility and distribution of the network is really important. So we are not proposing a capacity target. And when we looked at actually delivering 20 meters square per capita at a 30-year horizon, we looked at Wesley and we looked at Wainui. With Wesley, if we were to achieve that 20 meters square per capita, delivering for 10,000 residents over 30 years, we would have to spend an additional $320 million additional to I think it's about $50 million acquisition. So really, when we're making recommendation for the provision standards, we have to balance different factors. We have to balance, obviously, delivering good outcomes for our residents, which is, our priority. But we also have to balance achievability. Is the developer or developers going to be willing to sell us that much land? And there's also a cost factor. Can we afford that much land? Is it value for money for ratepayers? And so this is why we're not recommending further work to go and look at higher provision standards, because we know that there's already a funding shortfall. And so there's kind of a bit of a realistic view of what we can achieve.
Thank you. And it was remiss of me, Councillor Filipina led the working group, and I did say that he was going to open up before you, but then when you got here, I just got so excited. So apologies, Councillor Filipina. He's going to open up the conversation and debate and acknowledge all the work that's been done and acknowledge the working group as well. So apologies, Councillor Filipina. Member Henare.
Kia ora. Thank you. When you sent your letter to the iwi authorities, did you indicate if any of those trees from the 161 that are part of the plan change?
Wrong order.
Hey?
Wrong order.
Oh, is that the next one? Oh, I thought we were on trees. Oh, okay. I'll wait for the
There's
trees
lots
to grow.
There's lots of trees on the open space. Member Ashby.
Kia ora, thank you. No, that's all good. Thanks for the report. I'm interested in the engagement with Māori. So I know there's been the working group and a rōpū set up with several iwi and mātāwaka reps. What could council do better to ensure robust engagement with the 19 iwi going forward? I guess I'm interested in the gap in terms of the input, because I understand there's been some mixed views and responses. I know in the report there's some in particular related to policy 2, the acquisition, some unanswered questions from member Renata in terms of, again, the acquisition. And I have some, I guess, a question related to that is, you know, in your view, focusing on policy 2, you know, how does this handle treaty rights and interests? So there's design in there, and there's comments and feedback about co-management and things like that. But beyond just design, thinking of rights and interests in the land and how it came about before it's acquired, how is that handled in the policy? I'm struggling to see it. So could you just give me some guidance around that, please?
Or just your mic.
Sorry. The first question was better engagement with Manawhenua and Matawaka groups. We know they are highly solicited, and we have made a lot of efforts to communicate progress with them. And as you mentioned, we've had mixed responses with, unfortunately, no iwi provided feedback on the consultation document. We have had a lot of inputs through the Mare Ropu, so I'm quite confident that we've got to a good place. But maybe Louise might want to answer that more generally for policy, because that's an issue across all policy areas.
Yes, thank you, Member Ashby. I think it's a really good question, and one that we need to do more work on, about how we engage effectively, particularly around some of our complex strategies and policies, the demands we make on individual iwi to be able to respond to these. You know, how can we make that more reasonable? How can we support that process? I'm also aware that across the range of my department, which covers very wide range of policy. We're often going, you know, individually on individual policies. So I think as we build the relationships with iwi and be able to give an idea of what the forward work program is, hopefully we can do that better in the future. With this strategy, we have really tried to get input. The Māori Ropu was one way of doing that. It was self-selected, so just a number of, you know, people there. But I do acknowledge there's more work to be done in this area, and basically as council, how we make the process easier to have input, particularly at that strategy level. The other comment I'd make too is that this is a strategy, and in terms of the implementation, which is the next stages, how we plan that out, some questions and concerns, you know, are probably better addressed through that stage as well. So I think that continuing dialogue very important. Thank you.
Thank you. And just, I guess supplementary, just to clarify as well, because it sounds like there's some more work to do, and I'm concerned just because I can't see it in the policy around, because that's fine to leave it to implementation in one way, but if there is, for example, Parks acquisition of treaty settlement land, for example, there's nothing in this about that, and that's a concern to me. Marae on parkland, urupa, things like these strike to the heart of Article 2 of Te Tiriti. So I can't see it reflected in the acquisition policy, which is a concern to me. So if you can give me, I'm asking for comfort, but if it's not there, then yeah.
So the question was raised about how we, by Member Renata, about how we consider treaty obligations when we acquire land. So noting that through the provision there would be discussion with the interested parties, but acquisition is a commercial in confidence transaction, so there's no discussion at that stage. But what we have put in the policy is that when possible, we would locate parks near iwi land to increase the sizable piece of land and the value of both lands.
I guess just, I don't know if the last part of marae and on, it's not exactly part of this, but how does this improve what Member Ashby's asking around consideration of marae on open space?
So open space acquisition for marae purposes is out of the scope of the policy. It is enabled if the governing body or local boards resolve to acquire land to locate a marae, then they can do so. They don't need a policy to cover that. And I hear from my colleagues that there are examples of urban marae being located on reserve land. So this is enabled. However, it's, as I said, it's outside the scope of this policy. If you want to find out more, I can put you in contact with the right staff and they can follow up with you.
Yeah, I'll just let, I know there's other questions, but I think we'd want to settle this conversation. So, no, I'm trying to give Member Hennaday a question as part of the, I assume it's going to be connected to those questions. You can ask.
Well, I'm just wondering, out of what you said, how marae out of scope was this? Is that what you said?
That's correct. So the open space provision and acquisition policy does not cover every single instance of when Auckland Council buy land, you know, and so it's not a fully comprehensive policy that looks at every single opportunity. And so marae land acquisition doesn't require a policy to go ahead.
Yes, just perhaps to add to that, this particular policy, we also have some associated policies. So we have the Community Facilities Network Plan. I think perhaps it's an issue that it'd be good if we could come back to you with some further information on that, but probably more within the scope of that plan rather than this one. But I do hear the specific question that you're asking, and we can certainly come back directly to you on that.
You nearly had me. But if you come back to us, could it be with the reasoning behind why marae are not part of, or even new marae are not part of the plan change? You just, I mean, not now, but in your letter to us.
Okay.
Yes,
Just want to
absolutely.
clarify
Acknowledging
to make sure, because exclusion sounds wrong to me, but what you're trying, am I understanding it right, that the questions being asked are because this is not necessarily about what is on, it is about the provision of, and then we would be doing, you know, marae and other things are set under the facilities policy. Is that what I'm missing, or?
Yes, I suppose just to clarify and understanding the question that you're asking, this deals with the provision of the land. We have associated policies, a Community Facilities Network Plan, and other means by which we support marae that will cover that. And we undertake to come back to you with more detail about that following this meeting.
Thank you. Good questions. Councillor Baker.
Oh, we're going around, and obviously the three of us are poster children for being active. But my question is in regards to where in the strategy we talk a lot about and we talk a lot about acquisition, and I guess one of the changes is clarifying that the council attempts to acquire land early in the development process as budget enables, and the critical thing there is when budget enables. So does this strategy enable, because I can't see it and I've read it and reread it and tried to look, does this strategy enable council to actually look at other options? Because we talk about the provision of open space and the importance of it, but we are talking only about what we can buy and only when we can afford it, and it means that some parts of Auckland don't get anything. There's development and they get nothing. And also it has developers saying, we would like to partner with you in terms of the provision of open space, but we say no because our policy doesn't allow that, or our strategy doesn't allow that. So does this strategy, or any strategy that falls underneath it, allow for a developer to say, I want to provide open space and I want to put a park on it, or I want to put things on it, and then later in the piece we enter into an agreement, because we can't even get into that agreement because later in the piece we have nothing, because we have no policy that allows us to put something in the LTP. So I want to know, does this strategy cover that sort of situation, or is this all about the old-fashioned council will provide everything for everybody, and if you have to wait, you have to wait?
Thanks for the question. So acquisition is a really broad term that speaks about us as council bringing land into our ownership. It doesn't really matter how we acquire it, whether we pay for it, whether it's a partnership, whether it's a bequest or donation. So all of those methods of acquisitions are mentioned in the strategy on page 72. And absolutely, and you'll be aware we've got also Deliver Differently business case, where we're actually promoting different ways of working to get better value for money for Aucklanders and our ratepayers.
I guess that, but again, we're just coming back to, it is about us buying before we do anything with it. And so I'm wanting to know, can we within this strategy enter into a different agreement where we might actually lease for a period of time, or something like that, because I don't see it, and I think that hamstrings us as a council. Providing to the community what we hear is so important, but we're also happy to sit for years and years and years, decades, on our hands until we can find the money to do it. So can we do that within the strategy, and what would be needed to make that happen?
I guess leasing is more common for facilities than it is for land, but there's nothing stopping us doing it.
Just to add, Councillor Baker, on page 72, the strategy talks about collaboration with developers, including partnerships as part of policy 2, under alternative funding or delivery methods. So actively looking at different ways of how we do things, again with the emphasis on value for money for ratepayers as well. So, you know, these things are possible and enabled.
Okay, thank you.
And even on the principle 4, maybe there's just a word or added, you know, there's the facilitator, there's the partner, you know, working with community developers, mana whenua. There could be an additional word, because it says investment is provided by the council, but delivery is by a third party. Potentially there's just a slight change in there that could be provided by the third party as well. I think that's what the policy for the working together says, but I think if it's not clear, then we trip up on ourselves to enable what Councillor Baker's talking about. Councillor Turner.
Thank you. There seems to be a fundamental change to that tension between regional parks and local parks. Am I correct? The regional parks used to be purchased on an intrinsic value, a sort of cultural value. They were often purchased way ahead of when the demand turned up. Take Shakespeare, for instance. The demand followed the park was there because of its intrinsic special cultural heritage value. But this has now changed to, if I've got back to the right page for my wording, it's changed to a case-by-case consideration, and we're talking about a change to a capacity sort of overview. How do parts sit in that? I'm fearful that we end up with just going to where we're serving a population need now, when regional parks have managed to actually be very good in serving an unseen populational need way into the future.
Yes, thanks for the question. So the acquisition of regional park is covered here. It's a very enabling policy. As you mentioned, is a case-by-case consideration. My understanding of historical acquisition, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that they were on an opportunity basis when a piece of land had the values that we expect in a regional park, and that was when regional park was acquired, and it was not a function of where the population was living or where it was growing. So it's a slightly different focus than the rest of how we grow the network.
Thank you, but that's my point. I'm working off some pictures here because I was working on so many screens, but one of these things I had, which had the regional park stuff there, it showed the strikeouts and the additions. And there was some in red, some in purple, some struck out in black. I found it hard to follow. But where the acquisition of land for new regional parks or regional park extensions will be assessed on a case-by-case basis. And that has to be seen in light of this idea of a capacity overview. There's a tension there, I believe, between a regional park purpose and that capacity purpose of local sports, where the people are. And so I'm concerned that regional parks, the opportunistic times when something with intrinsic value that is comes up it falls by the way for this capacity strategy. What would you?
So there's no capacity consideration when we look at opportunity to buy regional park land. So it's very much looking at the opportunity to buy a piece of land on a case-to-case, by-case basis. So is it something you want to pursue? Is it a good new regional park? Is there a good extension of regional park? So those type of consideration based on those regional parks management plan values. And so there's no consideration of capacity. Of course, when we look at the whole of the network, all of our parks, the dock, the regional parks, the local parks, that's just built up to a whole of network. But regional parks acquisitions are enabled, so you can just consider each opportunity for their own merit.
Further to Carol's comment, there was quite a lot of discussion on this issue in the political working group and in the feedback, and we did amend the strategy to reflect that, to be enabled on a case-by-case basis. There was also quite a bit of discussion around, not only the value of regional parks for people and their recreation and leisure activities, but also biodiversity and cultural values as well. So the final draft strategy does pick up on that input and enable that case-by-case assessment.
Thank you. You touched on that. So some of the stuff I'm channeling is through ex-councillor Sandra Coney and historian. I've had quite a lot of discussion with her. She's got a depth to this way beyond me, and she was the one who explained some of this stuff to me and said that you'd put in a case-by-case basis to half-pie accommodate her concerns. Could you explain to me her concerns that she believes aren't accommodated by this?
I believe their concerns were addressed. So initially we had promoted an equity consideration when we looked at open space acquisition for regional park purposes. We did some mapping and looking at whether all urban Aucklanders have access to a regional park within a 20-kilometer drive. And we noted that in the future, people living in South Auckland, especially around the Drury area, which is obviously, as you know, a fast-growing area, won't have access to a regional park within 20 kilometers. And so we suggested that that could be a good area to prioritize a new regional park. Member Coney was not comfortable with that approach. She felt, like, as you mentioned, that local parks, regional parks acquisition, should be acquired for their values, regardless of where they're located. And so as a consequence, through the feedback from the Joint Political Working Group, we have removed that whole section. And that's why you see some strikes. Yeah, so all the track changes are in the document. So we've removed that. The opportunity in South Auckland still exists, but it's not in the policy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is that kind of what you, 2010, you were talking about those distances, were you?
So that's a different one. That was what Albert Eaton were requesting, that we aim for 20 metres squared per person, but what the staff are saying that even in suburb areas that could be up to $300 million. So the aim in the current policy is to aim between 10 and 20 square metres per person. That's different to the access to a regional park.
I do share ex-councillor Sandra Coney's concerns that there's a tension here between the purpose of regional parks and the purposes we're talking about here today. Thanks.
Councillor Darby.
Chair, you said you had some recommendations. I think maybe my questions will be addressed if the recommendations take things into account. You've got some recommendations?
Yes, I read them out at the beginning, but sorry, we probably could have sent them around too. There's the E and the F. All of the recommendations are the same, apart from E and the F. Support development of an open space land acquisition prioritisation program to provide a 10-year and 30-year view of open space acquisition pipeline and support budgeting and work planning processes, noting that open spaces are required as budget enables, and then request that the next long-term plan prioritise adequate budget to enable open space acquisitions early in the land development process.
So, don't want to put you on the spot here, but maybe you could just articulate. There's quite a lot of concern about policy 2, right? There was public feedback on policy 2. There was general concern about policy 2, and then one of the recommendations, though not the staff firmed up recommendation, is to look at undertaking a review of the policy 2 area. That's it in a nutshell. So are you subscribing to undertaking a review of policy 2 or going with the staff recommendation?
So I guess, and maybe I'll get the staff to answer, all that feedback was considered, and much like that question to Councillor Turner now, the policy has been changed based on that feedback. Do you want to just go through based on the feedback, what was reviewed and changed in policy 2 to improve it, but maybe also giving Councillor Darby the nuance around the specifics around the concern around we should be aiming for 20 metres squared, which is a fantastic aspiration, but whether we would afford the billions of dollars that might cost.
I'll make a general comment and then Carol will talk about it in the detail. The staff recommendation is that the policy is adopted as a whole, including policy 2. In terms of the feedback, it's fair to say that we had mixed reaction to it, both through some of the working group members, but also through the local boards. I think we have 11 that supported policy 2 or the full strategy, with rest of the boards, some had concern over the policy 2 part. So we have taken some of that feedback on board, but as the general discussion before indicated, we have looked at achievability and at our financial environment as well in terms of putting our recommendations forward. Carol will talk a little bit more about what we have changed in the final draft on that policy 2, just to answer your question, Councillor Darby.
Thank you. So we had, through the public feedback, we had quite a high level of support for policy 2. We had 80% support for policy 2. So we didn't make significant changes to this policy. We made some points of clarification. And I have my principal, Aubrey Bloomfield, online. or we could just give you some specific answers to what's been changed. In terms of the Joint Political Working Group and what was some of the concern, there were twofold. The first was the quantity of open space, local open space provided. And as we mentioned at the beginning of this meeting, a lot of work has gone through looking at different options. And so the option that we're putting forward is the one we think has the best consideration of different factors, such as outcomes, achievability, affordability. So if we were to do more work on provision standards, it would mean that this committee would want to see a higher level of open space than what's provided here. And you would also be making an indication that you're willing to significantly increase the budget, the acquisition budget in the next LTP. So that's something for your consideration. The other points that some local boards and some joint political working group members made is that the policy is restrictive in the sense that we have standards, we have quantity standards, and we've got quality standards, and then we've got acquisition standards. And they felt that it was too much, it was quite restrictive. Our response is not to change anything because our experience dealing with planners, consultants, developers is that you need a certain level of specificity to start the provision discussion, to have the acquisition negotiation. If you start from a low base where you haven't got your line in the sand clearly expressed, then you're not going to get good outcomes for your residents. And of course, in the LGA, there's a clause that says that all policies can be departed from if you have a compelling case. So there's always, you don't need to have that in every single policy. It's in the legislation. And interestingly enough, we've heard about Plan Change 94 this morning, and Heard, which is the applicant, made a point that there are a lot of policies and plans around open space. It's hard to know which one to look at. The policy is only about good practice, and so they don't have to comply with anything effectively. And the Commission has agreed with that viewpoint. So we think that in this policy, we've got the opportunity to actually make a really stronger case as to what we expect in terms of quantity and quality for delivering good outcomes for our communities.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for that explanation. And now I checked this morning with the Executive Officer, Megan. I was a Commissioner on Plan Change 94, and it's now, as of Tuesday, subject to appeal in its entirety. So we do need to be careful about referencing that. So I'll ask my question in this way, really. I'm aware that commissioners over a long period have found it very difficult to hang their hat on the metric to give them guidance as to what the provision of open space should be. Now, you've referred to there being no internationally accepted metric, but of course, there is no international accepted metric on the design of an urban road or the design of a footpath or the design of a building. There is none. I don't think it's about an internationally accepted, but there are international standards. World Health Organization, UN Habitat, they are the two international standards for open space provision that are held up and often referred to. I guess what I'm asking here, if we adopt this today in its totality, including the open space acquisition provisions, do future commissioners have something to hold fast to and actually be able to defend that through either our council-led plan changes or private-led plan changes or whatever, that are going to stand firm, subject to appeal before higher courts like the Environment Court and High Court. Are you confident that where we're landing this policy is actually going to be, a steadfast position?
Well, the proof is always in the pudding, of course, so time will tell, but I think we've made a lot of improvements from our 2016 policy. First of all, the fact that we have a single document is really helpful, so there's less confusion. It's a less busy policy area. There's a single document, a single source of truth. And then the policy has been expressed in a much more simple manners, much more possibly people dealing with RMA matters are more used to. We've got policy objectives, so the language probably speaks better to commissioners. And then we've got really clear standards in tables. We also have, as you mentioned, the WHO doesn't have a standard, but is quite often cited as mentioning 9 meters square per person of open space as a matrix. Here we're saying that we should not accept less than 10 meters square per person. So that will also help having that single benchmark, help a lot of discussions with applicants.
Okay, and just checking with the team and possibly Megan. So this is a very real challenge for Auckland Council and commissioners. Okay, we know that you really got that right, and you referred to a particular plan change which we can't really discuss. Megan and the team, has this been run by legal, like really thoroughly, like from the viewpoint of if we were challenged on this, like running some scenarios through the policy, running some legal scenarios, has that been done? Because I ask this because I'd really like to close this off, because there's so much wriggle room at the moment. I'm wanting confidence that the wriggle room has been dramatically reduced. You never get rid of it entirely. I want some confidence that that wriggle room that we've faced on recent plan changes has been dramatically reduced. And legal has cast eyes over this, through those scenarios of recent.
So that's an interesting question. So we've worked a lot with our colleagues who carry out acquisitions to make sure that the policy could be implemented, but we have not worked with legal, taking a legalistic point of view. So yes, no, we haven't done that.
Okay, so I was just sort of assuming that there would be legal running their eyes over this. So, Megan, can I just quiz you on this? I think there is merit in actually checking with legal. Why are legal not running their eye over a policy like this when we know we're getting appealed on these very decisions of acquisition? I'm talking about the acquisition provisions.
Look, I think my response would be this is not a dissimilar situation that we have with a lot of our kind of policies or settings where the implementation of it is in this case under the Resource Management Act, through a plan change, through a resource consent kind of thing. But this policy is not a resource management document. So there is always this constant legal matter of waiting, or whether it's a statutory document in the same way as like a plan change is a statutory document, a statutory process. So I understand your question, and it's a good one. And I think, and we do rely on our legal team very much when we are implementing these kinds of things, whether it is through plan changes, negotiations with developers, development contributions, same kind of thing. We've got a statutory policy there. It relates to this policy.
we are in this situation for lots and lots of documents. So in one sense, this is not an unusual situation for us to be in. The question, I think, at this point, from a legal perspective, is what we're writing, like legal and robust, and we're not kind of going out of scope. And I think it's clear that is not occurring. We're absolutely within scope, doing what we do. The question, though, which you're absolutely right about, is how does this get implemented? How can we, within the resource management context, keep this tight? There's no legal answer to that question, in my view, being a bush lawyer, that because this document is not an RMA document in the same way as the unitary plan is, or that the processes are under the RMA. So we, as always, do our best, and in a lot of cases it's fine, and in others, people feel that it falls short in some way. I don't know, Louise, you might have any other comments.
Just to add to what Megan said, again, it's where a policy has relationship to other legislation or other considerations. We have looked at scenarios in developing this policy, obviously looking at the impact, looking at what some of the possible financial considerations would be. When we get to that next level, I think in terms of implementation, certainly would want to test out as well too. But I think the assurance you're wanting is, if it was challenged, would we have a high degree of confidence to say, yes, there wouldn't be an issue with it. I think the point Megan has made, as a policy, we've done our best within the scope of this policy to say it's robust, it's based on the best evidence that we've been able to find. We've had considerable input, as you've heard, from a whole range of sources as well. And so in terms of the policy process, we've certainly tried to make that as robust as possible. But your question is a very good one. Thank you.
Okay, so just continuing that theme then, Megan, is there a way by which we could, I'm conscious of where we are today and all the work that many, many people have put into this, and I'm not here to pull the rug or anything like that. I'm wanting to add value. Is there any way that we could actually, agree to this today, subject to a final legal oversight, and then delegate the absolute ultimate signing off to the chair and deputy? I ask that because of the challenges in courts that we're getting.
Yes, I believe you could do that. Yep.
Okay, as executive officer, I'm suggesting that, but as executive officer, do you think there is merit in doing that?
Look, I'm not sure, to be honest. However, I'm happy to draft up something to that effect, and maybe as the conversation continues, that could become clearer. So I'm happy to draft something to that effect, Mr. Chair, and then you can just work it through with yourselves.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, well done, Councillor, because one of my questions was, does this give developers definitive minimum standards when building high immensity development? And so listening to your questions, my supplementary was, what do we need to do to amend this policy so that it does? I think, well, she's left the table, but I just think I'd be happy to support an inclusion of amendment to that point. But I'm going to come to some other questions, if I may. The first one is, I asked when the chair of the local board had their input, whether the questions could be answered. And I've heard what you've said. So basically you're saying that if you increased the land if you increased the size of the open space provision standards, it would cost something like 322 million for just one suburb, and if you amortise that over the region, it would be prohibitive. Is that correct? That's really why you're saying no to the local board chair, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yes.
Okay. So how much do you think the LTP ask will be to prioritise more open space?
So that's an interesting question. We haven't assessed the financial implication of the new policy, but we know that because of the last LTP, the acquisition budget was cut significantly compared to previous long-term plan acquisition budgets. So the current 2016 policy is not funded. Not fully funded. And so we probably already have a 300 million, 400 million shortfall and to deliver the policy over the next 10 years. So you're looking at that quantum of funding.
Yeah, I suppose what I'm saying is I recognise that the last LTP was a bit of an exception to the rule. I mean, we had probably the worst time that we've ever had with, you know, immediate cut in budget. So we had to cut our coat to suit our cloth of the time. But you're saying that actually, having been through that very low point, you want to bring it back to the standards that we had, you know, previous, raise the dollar value up.
Well, that's the direction that we got from the Joint Political Working Group, that they want to deliver really good outcomes from our communities. And that's what we've heard really strongly from the community consultation and the local boards. Open space is important to our communities. It's delivering a lot of benefits. Local boards especially have said we need to consider acquisition early in the planning processes. And of course, with open spaces, because you buy land, if you miss the opportunity to buy land early, whether it's greenfield or large brownfield regeneration projects, the opportunity is gone. Or, you know, it's quite difficult to retrofit your network. As you will know with ORAK, it's fully developed. The opportunities are few and far between, and land is very expensive. And also quite often held by different land owners. So if you miss the opportunity to buy your parks when the opportunity is there because you haven't got the funding, it's hard later on.
I get that. I suppose what I'm saying is we've always acquired more land every single year, haven't we? I mean, we've always prioritised the acquisition of land as a city, as a growing city. So are you confident that, you know, we will continue to do that and meet the growth requirements if we adopt this policy?
Perhaps just, Councillor, just to highlight the additional recommendations E and F, I think we need to do that work in terms of looking at the future pipeline, and recommendation E certainly supports that, and as Carol has also said, just emphasising enabling those open space acquisitions early in the land development process. So I think those are two points that have been brought up that will help with that future acquisition and ensuring that we do have the space available in future as budget permits.
Yeah, just budget aside. I want to ask you a question about point 8. Sorry, Chair, I've just got a few questions around this. I mean, you don't recommend increasing the quantity of open space provision, and one of the reasons you use for that is achievability. Why don't you think you can do it based on achievability? You talk about affordability. I understand affordability, but why don't you think you can achieve that?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So our acquisition method, the most common acquisition method that we use is willing buyer, willing seller. So we have to negotiate with a landowner or multiple landowners to acquire the land. And so unlike a road or stormwater, which, you know, is linear, there's a network, a landowner can say, well, you don't need to buy here, go and buy the neighboring piece of land. We can't force them to sell us land. And when you have a developer developing a large area of land, obviously they want delivering, a good neighborhood so that their houses sell, but they also want to maximize their return on investment. So we can't expect them to sell us lots of land. And so that 20 meters square per capita, that's assuming that a landowner or landowners would be willing to sell us all that land, which is unlikely because that would diminish their return. That's that consideration. And then there's also how much within council we are resourced, to negotiate acquisition. So that would just be quite a significant number of acquisition negotiations. So those are the two reasons we say it's probably not going to be achievable, if that makes sense.
Which gives me more reason to support Councillor Darby and what he's sort of thinking. And my final question is, are these minimum standards or maximum standards?
They're neither nor.
Square meterage, yeah.
Yes. And in the past policy, we had a range. So, for example, we said a neighborhood park needs to be between 3,000 meters square and 5,000 meters square, depending on the type of environment it sits in. And so there was more wiggle room. And what we found is that through acquisitions, we always ended up with a lower size parks. Although the policy said 3,000 to 5,000 meters square, we only got pretty much always 3,000. And so we've removed that level of flexibility, and we say this is the size we want when.
And did you go with the low figure or the high figure?
So it's gone from 2 to 5, and depends on the capacity. So when we've got...
You've raised it to 5.
It's moved from 2,000 meters square to 5,000 meters square. So when you have an area where you already have a lot of open space, it's fine to deliver a smaller park. But when you have an area where there's not that much provision, we say, let's go and buy a bigger park, but we don't give the options about the size. We say we want 5,000 in that case. You've gone for the high figure,
okay. And finally, at the risk of sounding like a lawyer, something versus something, at the end of the day, there's always politics in this, isn't there? So if somebody came to this council with an option to do something outside of the policy, as we did, for example, with the Botanic Gardens, this body has the ability to make that call as an exception, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, very good point that, the Nathan land was against the current policy, but we made a decision to fund that because it was unique. Mayor Brown?
Okay, thank you. I've listened carefully to this and I've got growing concerns. The entrance was a speech about the wisdom and the wonderful thing for social welfare from open spaces. Well, if that goes for cafes and pubs. We'll be having to buy them shortly as well. I want to know, is there enough flexibility? I completely oppose the idea of choosing a number per square metre. That's just going to foist us with a financial problem at some stage or other and a forced thing. Plus, I also oppose the thing of having each local board separating it for their area. People choose to live in denser areas and we are choosing to intensify some areas. I have chosen to live in an intensified area and I know what that brings. And I live in the city because I know we have regional parks, which we go to. And I also know that when we buy land, it's often episodic because it's just opportunities. You will recall last year that we bought the Botanic Gardens land because it just happened to pop up. But what if it hadn't met the $20 person per square metre, or we'd blown the money because we put it into the LTP and it wasn't there? We've also had wonderful donations like the greenhives from the Platt family. Does that mean because it was donated there, that doesn't count for the thing, so that the people in Greenhive are going to end up with more than their share? The other thing, if we do it on a square metre basis, the people who live in expensive land areas will have much more spent on them than people in other areas, and it'll be another round of inequality. And so this has got to be very flexible, the absolute opposite of being rigid for planning commissioners. Does it include lakes and harbours? Because if we buy, is this public area, if we bought land that gave us access to a bit of harbour that you can't suddenly get to, do we add that in the per square metre basis? And again, coming back to the impact on developers, of which I have some experience, can they trade development contributions for contributions of land, as long as it's good stuff? I mean, we need flexibility. We don't want to get in a situation where that's automatic and they give you the shitty bit at the bottom of the subdivision that no one will buy. But on the other hand, they might provide some developers, not one of them, always provide a tennis court because it helps you sell land. But in fact, the people in the area love it because we never got around to providing. So I want to know, this has to be flexible, totally flexible. And we're trying to intensify people. That's one of the things I attended a meeting last night to come along with, thank you, coming, Megan, for people who are very worried about intensification. And yet it's an area which is already quite intensified. So we're going to intensify an area like we're going to have problems when you intensify around railway stations. So we're going to get lots and lots of people to live there. So near a railway station, it's over and hop on the train and in 5 minutes they're at the Domain, which is a huge area. But if we're going to intensify them, get them all living in tall buildings, we're going to have to buy the next 5 blocks of land to give them their $20 square metres for everyone who's shoved up in a big high building. It makes no sense whatsoever. And so I absolutely oppose the ENF, and in fact I'm not even sure I'm going to vote for this at all because it just isn't, it's just not flexible enough.
I guess if I could...
So I'll leave it at that. So if you can answer some of those questions.
The questions on flexibility, I think we're not putting forward the 20, the policy I understand is 10 to 20. Could you talk about the flexibility, the effect on high density?
We shouldn't have any square metre thing because we should look at what makes sense in that particular area. And are these people, if they're going to be next to the CRL, they're going to be 3 minutes away by train from another area. I mean, and the borders of our local boards are one of the most random things I've ever seen. They don't even comply with the boundaries on which we get elected. So when I'm not going to have it where they're all going to demand the same square meterage, because axiomatically there's going to be more in Rodney and in Franklin because it's cheaper land and it's out in the countryside. And in fact, and we get the value of green space when we drive past a golf course that we never play golf on, that we don't need, that might even be privately owned for all I know. So
maybe if we could
answer some of those, please.
Yeah.
So it's obviously a choice for this council whether you want to have open space provision standards or not, or whether you rely on the current network to deliver for your residents, current and future. An option would be to have no provision standards and assume that residents just use what's here now, and you maintain the network, and then that residents in areas like Drury and Red Hills travel to access our existing parks, whether regional or local parks. So that's where you have the most flexibility. And then if a park is delivered in an area, you know, it's opportunistic, it can happen, nothing stops it, but there's no obligation on anyone to deliver anything. So that would be the no standards approach. If you want to have open space delivered to your community, then our recommendation is you have some standards and you have a level of prescription, so you are able to lead those conversations about provisions and acquisition Our experience is that flexibility doesn't get you good outcomes for Aucklanders. So that was your first question. The second question about what happens if a developer wants to give us a piece of land in lieu of development contribution. So we have a whole team at council who deals with developers, and they have those different funding agreements in place on a case-by-case basis with developers to enable that. And so that's going to move in the new urban development department. So that's possible as well instead of DC.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Walker.
Got a few questions. Am I correct in saying